How do you institute horror into a D&D or TTRPG game that is not horror-centric? Matthew Colville said to, instead of turning the dial all the way up to 10, or maybe 11 or 12, where assume the average of the horror in your game is at a 3 or a 4, instead, have the horror in your game turned up to a 6 or a 7. This is a notable enough increase that it will be different tonally, and the players will recognize it as it being more horrific than the average, but it's not so much that it's tonal whiplash, and the players feel either resentment or resistance towards the change. Now, what does a 6 or a 7 look like in terms of horror? Let's look at skeletons and zombies as an easy example of what a 3 or 4 level horror looks like versus a 6 or a 7 level horror. When the knob is turned to 3 for a game's horror, a zombie might just be a walking corpse. If it's turned to a 4, it might be rotted and have a knife sticking out of it as a previous victim to it fell trying to defend themselves. But generally, you're not going to describe more than that. You might describe its smell of how it's a stench of decay, or you might describe how it shambles unnaturally and moans and groans in guttural utterances, but none of this has the specificity of horror behind it. It's all just creepy and indicating more type that it is undead rather than actually trying to scare the players. Similarly, a 3 or a 4 for a skeleton might have it be dusty and perhaps there's a crack in its skull or it's missing teeth or a jaw, but it's a skeleton, so that's okay. It's not expected that the skeleton will be in the same condition as the zombie, and if it is more damaged, well, it's just a skeleton. It's not as closely related to what a living human looks like. When you turn the dial up to 6 or 7, a zombie might still shamble forward, but now it's because its leg is broken, shattered bones within, grinding against each other, so much so that when it's within 5 feet of you, you can hear it. You can hear the bone tearing against the flesh, and if you look, you can see movement under the skin as the fragments try to pierce the skin. And eventually, I would say that it does, because that's like 7, maybe an 8 on the horror scale. Similarly, take the skeleton that's missing its jaw and take that same character trope and put it on a zombie. Now you have a zombie who shambles forward, broken leg. However, they're missing their jaw, or maybe it's half detached and dangling from their mouth. Their tongue has lolled out and drapes across their neck, slick with saliva and blood from a previous victim, as it stares at all living things, trying desperately to feed a hunger that can never be sated, either because of an undead curse or because it's physically incapable of it because of its injuries. For the skeleton, instead of having it that these are sterile guardians of a forgotten time period, preserved from the world for centuries, have it be someone who is rapidly approaching the end stages of decay. The skin that is peeling from the bones is jerkied in some positions, thick like leather, stuck to the bones stubbornly. The bones are not bleached white, they are stained crimson, as this is a skeleton that was a mortal living their life merely days or weeks ago, supernaturally reanimated. So I started with zombies and skeletons because they're easy. They are fixtures of horror. However, what if you take something more like a goblin or a hobgoblin or orc? Well, at a tier 3 or 4, you might have them be ferocious and barbaric and feral. You might have them snarl and have sharp teeth that they drool from as they stare at you and laugh maniacally. But again, that's creepy at worst. That isn't very actually that scary. So if you turn it up, again, just to 6 or 7, you don't need to go all the way. You can have it be that the leader has a necklace of elf ears and dwarf tongues, and upon entering combat with the party, the leader locks eyes with a dwarf and points into their own mouth and sticks their tongue out as an unspoken warning of what will happen should the enemy win. That is just enough to indicate a tone and allow the players to play ball with it without forcing them into a horror theme. Treat it as horror light and allow the players to opt into it as they would any plot point or character introduction. It isn't your job as the game master in order to force a certain tone or playstyle in the group. It is your responsibility to present the group with different tones that they can choose to resonate with them as the story dictates. And if it's truly an issue of any time it would make sense for one tone to happen, or if one person wants one tone and one person wants a different tone, that's an out-of-game conversation. But the onus of responsibility is not on you to tell the story of the game. That's if you're writing a book. The onus of responsibility is on you to set the players up in the right circumstances to tell a collaborative story. And oftentimes, if you turn the dial up to 6 or 7, they will be more willing to turn it up to 8 or 9 or 10 or even 11, depending on their interests and their skill. Have fun.